everyone. My name is Curtis Herring. I'm the Executive Director of UTRU, the Utah Transit Writers Union. And the reason I'm here with you now is we had some technical difficulties on our most recent membership meeting, but we did want to make sure that we at least provided you with the slides and what we discussed and provide a recap of what happened. And so that is what we are doing today. So I apologize if it's a little bit different. This is written for kind of an interactive portion, but here we are, the fun joys of technology. But let's kind of go ahead and get started and talk about what we discussed during the meeting. Specifically, we wanted to welcome you all back to UTRU. I want to introduce myself, Curtis Herring, Executive Director of UTRU. Also want to provide some short-term and long-term visions for the organization, for the union. We want to do a discussion on Free Fair February, what worked, what didn't. Also discuss August Change Day, August of 22. We want to make a call for board members to participate in UTRU. And then we also did have an open forum. I will go over some of the items that were discussed, and as well as we provided a Q&A for board members who were able to attend. Let's go ahead and begin at the beginning. Let's talk about welcoming you back to UTRU. Just kind of as a reminder, UTRU was formed in 2015 as the Utah Transit Writers Union. It was formed to advocate for transit riders statewide. We strive to make transit reliable, accessible, comfortable, efficient, and affordable for all. And finally, we want to foster a transit-affirming attitude. And what does that mean? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. We welcome people of all ages, races, social, cultural, and economic backgrounds who either use public transportation out of convenience, necessity, or just a sense of the common good. We want to advocate for the best transit systems both today and in the future. UTRU is a statewide organization. The U stands for Utah. And we advocate for better transit options up and down the state, being and improving transportation links from Logan to St. George, all the way to improving a single city block to make it more comfortable and inviting to transit unions or users. So our goals, let's make an affordable transit system. Affordability transit systems understand their roles as infrastructure. It is not an amenity, it is a necessity. It is our opinion that it is a public good and should be provided for accordingly. Also, we want our transit systems to be accessible. Accessibility means that we are able to serve minority and disadvantaged communities who become more fundamental to the system's long-term financial and political health. When accessibility is a priority, all transit members benefit. We also want a reliable system. Reliability makes people allow to structure their lives around transit. If you know the bus or train will be there, you can plan accordingly. This also re-enfranchises disadvantaged individuals by giving them consistency and a way to participate in their communities more often. We want efficient transit systems. Transit systems need to be efficient because they have limited resources. We want to not only serve more rides, but serve them better. Efficient transit systems honor their host communities by being resource aware and wise. We want comfortable systems. Comfortable transit systems encourage widespread adoption. If you are uncomfortable on a vehicle, you are not going to use it when compared to your car. We want to reinforce the dignity of all riders and their safety. People need to feel safe on their trains and buses. And then finally, we want affirming transit systems. This is creating a culture that encourages and promotes transit ridership. We want to do that, to put it another way, by having loyal people and people consistently use it, it becomes less of a concern for any individual to participate in it. There's not the same social stigma. We want a culture that promotes transit ridership. Move on a little bit. I would like to take this opportunity to kind of introduce you to me as the new executive director. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City. My first real transit experience was taking the 19 and 20 buses to and from West High to my home in Rose Park. I graduated from the University of Utah in political science, where I had the opportunity to intern in Washington, D.C., and amongst other things, use the transit system there. It is a good, solid system, works great, and it shows how things can be done right. I live just right off of the red line. More professionally, I've worked in several political campaigns. I've been volunteer coordinator, campaign manager, policy advisor, and in these roles, I've always included transit as just a personal thing that I feel is important for policymakers to be discussing. Currently, I work in the nonprofit sector. I am a program manager for a nonprofit that provides services for persons with disabilities. And part of these include helping provide people with transit connections. My current route, just so you know, is I take the Woods Cross front runner station all the way up to Ogden, where I'll either take the bus or bike to work and then repeat back and forth. And then finally, I live in Bountiful with my partner and her daughter and 3 cats. The 3 cats do not like taking transit, near as I can tell. They much prefer to stay inside. So let's talk, changing gears, let's talk about the short-term and long-term visions for UTRU. We are in a phase where we are rebuilding. COVID did a pretty good job of knocking us out, but hopefully things have returned. And so we want to start looking at our short-term and long-term goals again. So one of my goals is to build membership by reaching out to like-minded organizations, build up earned media and social media as well. I want to engage in, or we want to engage, and I will be engaging in coalition building through collaboration with local, regional, statewide organizations that advocate for transit, smart growth, and sustainability. We want to increase organizational coffers through fundraising efforts, grants, and high-dollar donors. We want to build a board of directors that is committed to obtaining all of these above goals. Looking more towards the long term, we want to create and maintain citizen input boards on all 5 general transit systems and UDOT in the state of Utah. We want to be the center of citizen-led transportation groups, both big and small. We want to identify and advocate for the underserved transit areas within existing transit systems. We also want to expand successful transit routes and provide and search for areas that would benefit from the creation of transit systems across the state. We also want to provide ongoing training and tools for citizen engagement at the local, city, region, and statewide level. We want to promote programs that increase mass transit ridership. And then we also want to make sure that we're listening to our members of the union and the goals that they would like to have identified as part of what we are able to achieve. Okay, let's talk about Free Fare February, because it was quite a radical change. Kind of to start things off, it was an initiative spearheaded by Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall back in December of 2020 to work with UTA, the largest system in the state, to provide free transit in the month of February. Why February? Well, first of all, air pollution. Absolutely, February is one of the worst months historically for air pollution, and so it was hoped that free fares would help reduce that. Also, Mayor Mendenhall wanted to honor the legacy of the 20th anniversary of the 2002 Winter Olympics by providing this service. Kind of some breakdowns as far as it's concerned. The total cost for the program for the month was just over $2.5 million. That was paid through various community partnerships and through governments, as well as current bus pass providers kicked in as part of those costs. As far as ridership numbers are concerned, compared to January of 2022, ridership across the system increased by 16% on weekdays, almost 70% on Saturdays, or 60% on Saturdays, and just over 30% on Sundays as a general statement. But when you break it down further, the biggest ridership numbers that we saw, and we have a slide that kind of breaks it down even further, but the biggest one was Saturday front runner service, which saw over 200% growth compared in ridership compared to January of 2022, so in a single month. It's estimated that 12 tons of pollutants didn't enter the air because of Free Fare February. That's an increase of 21% of removal from the air, if that makes sense. So if they anticipated 50 tons of pollutants going in the air, 21% of that went down, if that makes sense. And then riders were largely positive. towards the free fare system. Just over 80% of people had positive reviews, while 10% had neutral views on free fare February. So 90% at least neutral, but very much skewing towards the positive side of things. So in this next slide, here's a further breakdown that you can see as far as individual numbers and where they ended up compared from January to February. Just about every single system. You can see Frontrunner, Trax, On Demand, Paratransit. Just about every single system saw growth over the month, with the small exception of the UVX system. It saw a slight decrease. UVX primarily serves Utah State and the University of Utah, or excuse me, BYU. Oh, don't get that one wrong. And UVU, I apologize, down in Utah County. And they just believe that ridership dropped just because it's February and some people were out and so on and so forth. And also the ski bus remained largely the same. That is a very niche sort of service, so it's not expected that if you're going to take the ski bus, you're probably just going to take the ski bus. It's not necessarily to get you around town. But as you can see based off of those numbers, pretty much across the board, widespread increases on weekday, weekend, and Saturday service and Sunday service. It's pretty impressive. You can actually view the full report at that URL that we have provided, bit.ly/FFF_report. Probably about 25 pages, pretty comprehensive. If you're interested, feel free to take a look. So what's next as far as free fare February is concerned? Well, Utrue's opinion that there are mainly 4 types of riders during free fare February, at least for people that were trying to get from point A to point B. So there were the consistent riders. These are people that were going to take transit no matter what. That's part of their life. Most likely the people that are listening to this call right now. For example, I was going to take the train to work regardless of free fare February. It was just nice to not have to pay for passes. These are the core members of Utrue. And we want to continue to maintain plans to reach out to these core riders, to help expand the organization. The next type of rider was the occasional rider that increased their ridership due to the removal of those financial barriers. So these are often people on low incomes or people with disabilities. They had greater access because they didn't have to worry about the cost. Most people will go, oh, it's $2.50 to hop on the bus. I may have to pay $4, $5 to take Frontrunner, but I can afford that. Well, these are the people that don't, that where it's truly an important way of accessing, and they do have to watch their budgets very carefully. And by removing those financial barriers, they were freer to move about their community. They were freer to participate in the events that they wanted to participate because they didn't have to worry about the cost of getting there. On that front, Utrue wants to advocate for these riders by pushing for reduced and ideally free fare systems because we believe that with increased ridership, more people will have access to more opportunities. Then there were the curiosity riders. These are people that, have thought about, well, maybe I'll take the bus, maybe I'll take the train to work, but it costs money and I don't want to do it, so I'm not going to. But with that financial barrier lifted, they will go, well, I'll go ahead and give this a shot. I'll see what happens and see if the system really does work for me. Utrue wants to ensure that we provide an opening and welcoming environment to these individuals to make sure that transit is an accessible thing, something that does not seem weird and foreign to them, because we want to encourage them to become at least more frequent riders. And then the final rider was the novelty rider, the rider that just kind of wanted to say, hey, I've never been on the train before, I've never been on the bus, let's just see what happens, right? So it's the novelty rider that normally would not even consider transit, but because it was free, hey, why not? We want to work, and we intend to work with community partners and policymakers to increase transit options so that these novelty riders will consider it more and more often. Ultimately, we want to turn novelty riders into curiosity riders. We want to turn curiosity riders into occasional riders, and we want to turn occasional riders into consistent riders to help push people towards smarter transit options, both on a personal level and by providing systems that allow them to take mass transit. All right. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and give a brief overview of the August 2022 change day that is taking place. So for those of you that don't know, UTA has been publishing maps, and since March of this year, UTA has published proposed changes to their systems, which will be taking effect in August of this year. UTRU has met with UTA, the people that are deciding these routes privately, to provide input, express concerns, and receive some clarification about some of the changes that took place. What I can tell you is by far the biggest concern and the biggest thing that is holding up UTA in expanding routes is drivers. They simply do not have enough drivers to fully and adequately have 15-minute service across the system. They have to make decisions. There's other things that most people probably don't even consider about, things like where bathrooms are. If you're a bus driver, you need to consider that, but UTA takes those types of things into consideration during this and other change days. UTA also had an open comment period for the month of March and 3 virtual open forums as well that focused on Davis and Weber counties, Salt Lake County, and then Utah and Tooele counties. And those are available online. We should have the link in here as well. Let's provide a summary of what those changes are. At minimum, UTA is formalizing the emergency changes it made during COVID. So because those happened under an emergency, they did not have a formal public hearing. They are now turning it into that formal public hearing so that the COVID changes become the official changes, if that makes sense. And so at bare minimum, the services and systems will be what they have been under COVID. But outside of COVID changes, UTA is adding 1 additional route in Salt Lake and Weber County. They are also discontinuing 7 routes in Salt Lake County, 2 in Tooele and 1 in Davis County. For Salt Lake County, 3 of those routes are being absorbed through modified routes or other lines. 4 routes in Salt Lake County, 2 in Tooele, and 1 in Davis County are being replaced with the ride-sharing services similar to Uber and Lyft. And we can talk about that in a moment because that came up during the main meeting. And then they're going to be changing 8 routes in Salt Lake County, 1 route in Tooele County, and 3 routes in Weber County. So existing routes that they're changing the routing on. For more information, I encourage you to reach out to myself. You can email me at curtis.herring@utru.org. You can also visit and see specific changes to routes, the public comments and the videos. You can get to that by going to bit.ly/UTA_change_8-22. I encourage you to take a look at that. There's some neat little maps and things like that to specifically see what the changes are. They won't be publishing route times at this time, just the route location and stop location. Once times will be finalized a little bit later in the future, and those will come out. So we also made a call for board members. UTRU is looking for additional board members to participate in UTRU on a day-to-day basis. Well, I shouldn't say day, because let's talk about some of the responsibilities and expectations. Attend the monthly board meetings. That's once every month for about an hour. Attend the quarterly membership meetings, so once every 3 months approximately, about an hour. We also ask that you help write our quarterly newsletter, spit out 250 words. I will work with that board member to help find something and some topics. And then if there's any specific duties associated with it, so if you're a scribe or a treasurer or a chair or whatever, the duties associated with that. In addition, as far as expectations are concerned, we expect you to advocate for and be representative of transit riders across the state. We want you to represent UTRU faithfully when interacting with the general public, policymakers, and like-minded organizations, and we want you to use your personal connections to help grow membership and fundraising opportunities. We would ask, it's not required, but we ask our board members to set a personal fundraising goal of $50 a month just to help with contributions. So either directly contributing that or helping to identify fundraisers and donors that could provide that. And then we have an open forum section of the meeting. In that forum, one of the big questions revolved around change day, specifically what the on-demand service is. So to provide some clarification on that, that on-demand service is similar to Uber or Lyft, but it stays in a constrained service area. And so, for example, the areas basically south of 2600 South in Salt Lake County, as well as the Rose Park and Glendale communities in Salt Lake City, are currently on this system, and it's being modified. And Tooele and Southern Davis County, those areas are going to be switching over. How it works is you have your UTA app. It's a company called Via. You hail a vehicle. It's a passenger van, generally speaking, that comes up to close to your location. You may have to travel slightly to get there. But you basically board. You say, I want to go from here to here. So you can say, I want to go from my house to the North Temple train station, or I want to go from my house to the Smiths down the street. They pick you up, they drop you off. The justification for that is that it can help in suburban areas where density can be an issue and bus lines can be impractical. Concerns persist about drivers and who is driving these vehicles, because it does not appear it's a private company. There are just concerns that those drivers may not be at the same professional standards as a traditional bus driver or train driver would be. Other concerns and other things that were discussed were changes to the route, specifically going through the avenues. There was a conversation about whether the Avenues Community Council might be successful in their attempt to block changes in that community. Debate went back and forth on whether they will actually be successful, but what we can tell you is on Wednesday, Thursday, I believe it's Wednesday the 30, I guess it would be the 1st of June, the Avenues Community Council will be getting together to discuss the changes along with UTA and see what happens there. So we have an individual that will be reporting back to us on that. That should have been about it. We also wanted to talk to potential board members and provide a Q&A. What I will say is that you are free to reach out to me personally. I know several individuals already have, and I will be working with them. But if you are interested in being on the board, I'd be happy to sit down and meet with you and kind of talk about what board membership means beyond what we kind of talked about earlier, and to answer any individual questions that you may have. And so with that, that was the May 28th meeting in a nutshell. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to me, curtis.haring, curtis.haring@utru.org. Thank you again, and I appreciate all that you do for the union.